Good evening to our podcast called Learn to Teach to Succeed. The plan tonight is the discussion about asset-based learning, asset-based teaching, and asset-based leading. So these are the big questions I have today, and I was doing some research about that this week. I did a presentation with colleagues last week, and I thought it would be a good topic for today. So basically, asset-based pedagogy. So first of all, we need to figure out what the main topic is. So if you think about asset-based pedagogy, so here I was looking at a good definition, and I found a good one on a website called Edutopia, and I'm going to put a link at the bottom here to make sure that you have access as well. And before we move on, I'm going to do a quick sound check to make sure things are good. Yep, and things are great there. So here on Edutopia, there was a small article that's called 3 Steps to Developing an Asset-Based Approach to Teaching. So here, when we are thinking of asset-based approach, there's a few things we need to do. And you will notice that it is something that you will have most likely heard before, but maybe with different vocabulary. So basically, they say that asset-based approach is basically one, you begin with a diagnostic learning activity that provides information about what students know and can do. So the whole thing here is whenever you do an activity, you need to figure out what is your audience? What do they know before you actually start the lesson? First of all, so that you know their level, so you can help them and they don't get bored or they don't feel overwhelmed. The second step goes like this. Provide different learning pathways so that all students have the opportunity to meet high expectations. So here, in the past, we may have talked about differentiated learning, and it's the same thing, but named differently. And the third part here from that article is provide feedback to students identifying what they can do and strategies of using their strengths to address areas of need. So basically here is what is to have continuous feedback to the students or to people around you so that they know what they're doing well, what they can improve on, and what is the next thing they can do using strategies that you can help them. And you will notice that this information is something we can use in all aspects of not only learning, not only teaching, but in leadership as well, either in a company, in our family, or in a group setting. So let's see. Last week we had a professional development day, and it was all about asset-based learning. And as I was sharing the information with colleagues, and talking about the fact that when you think about asset-based learning, actually, for people that are just new right now, I'm going to divide the remainder of this podcast in 3. The first part will be about learning, so asset-based learning. The second part will be about teaching, and therefore I'll talk about asset-based teaching. And then the third part is about leadership. 3 topics that I love to read about, learn about, and share as well. So this is what we're going to do today. So for my first topic about asset-based learning. So what does that mean? That means that first of all, as a learner, you need to figure out, okay, I want to learn a new topic. So first of all, what do I need to do? So here I'm thinking about the idea that you listening to this podcast are learning all the time. If you are part of a team, and then team members need to learn new things. If you're at school, people are learning new activities all the time. So if you need to learn something, so the basics are the following. First, you need to know the language and vocabulary. If you know that, you may want to know some of the goals that you want to reach. And after that, it's all play. You want to say, okay, what are the activities do I need? Are the new words I need to work with so that I can make the best learning as possible? And that's all in the play. So that means that if you are in a situation where it's asset-based learning, first of all, you need to know, okay, I need to learn something new. Let's say that, so what do we know? So last week I was doing in my science class, we're looking at the new unit on electricity. And I do like to start with static electricity. And so the lesson, like I remember years ago, I used to spend a week on static electricity, small activities, reading, and so on. And nowadays, I only do it in 2 days. And here's what I do. I get the balloons. I get 3 bags of balloons. So most students have, I count for about 2 balloons per people. So what they do is I give them each balloon. They inflate the balloon, and then the first thing I give them a few minutes so they can play with them, knowing that what I want them to experience is that if they take the balloon and they rub it on their head, hair will stick to the balloon, and then I give them 5 minutes to tell me about that, mentioning that we're talking about static electricity. So first of all, students get all excited because it's a balloon, and then a few seconds after, there's always a couple that pop. It's a bit chaotic, but it works well. And then from there, then you can see people that are rubbing the balloon on their hair. And then they realize that they have different hair. Some hair stick to the balloon, some don't. And then they remind themselves that, oh, they can try to have the balloon stick on the wall or the ceiling from static electricity. So what happens here is that I'm giving them a balloon and I'm starting the learning with what they already know. So this is what basically the first thing about asset-based learning. You want to know, to have a diagnostic to say, what do they know? For most of them, they've played with balloons. For most of them, they have had balloons that popped in the past. So it's all in good fun. I always bring some more pictures of people with hair sticking up to the balloon. I bring some pictures about a cat with some styrofoam pieces on them. So the whole idea here is that they realize that, okay, things are happening here. And the beauty of that is that I remind them that the week before or 2 weeks before, we had talked about chemistry and how we can have charged particles. And that was interesting because some of them put two and two together. And then about 10 minutes in the lesson, then we sat down and said, okay, what was happening? So what happened is that this was a diagnostic activity from which students had vocabulary. They could talk about the experience. Then we raised all kind of questions about hair types, products. Why do balloons stick on the wall or not? And the whole idea here is that that's the best way to start a lesson. This is what we call asset-based learning. I'm asking them to demonstrate something, and I want to know, based on what they know, can they show me what they know up to this point? And usually within 15 minutes, we have a good idea about what static electricity is. So after this is done, usually we talk about particles. So therefore, we have positive and negative. They attract each other, same charges, they repel. And then I get the next one is I get a little, what did I do? Oh, we have equipment where we have different materials. So sometimes some rods made of some plastics, some hardened rubber, some glass. And then we also have pieces of cloth. And when you rub them together, then we realize that we're creating friction that excites electrons. And what happened is we can create a situation where we can bend water from running from a tap. So these are all things that many of them have not done before. Many have done so. So what happens is that I give them vocabulary so that they can talk to each other about the situation. So this is what asset-based learning is. We have them trying to get their thoughts together. We looked at vocabulary, then we show something new. And when we think about asset-based, so when I say asset, so if you're in business and you have some assets, it's basically for example, real estate can be an asset. So this is what you own and something that can bring you money or cash flow. So if it is asset-based learning, that means that they have knowledge, they know stuff. And what happens is that they can tell me information based on what they know. And what it is interesting is that when you think of asset-based learning, you have to think of a few other aspects. And I'm going to put in the comments below or in the description another article that is from the California Department of Education. And here they were talking about asset-based pedagogy. And here, what is interesting is we have, when you think of asset based pedagogies, we have to think of a few things, and this include culturally sustaining pedagogy, culturally and linguistically responding teaching, and culturally relevant pedagogy. So here is the whole idea that students are coming from a variety of background, variety of schools, variety of countries, variety of beliefs. And what happens is that you need to find a way wherever you can assess what they know, but also you can have them share with you their learning. And the beauty with the example of the balloon is, regardless if someone speaks very little of a language, the fact that we do an activity, we are taking from their mind the experiences, and they can show us that they know the information. They may not know the vocabulary because, for example, English is their second, third, or fourth language. And then I can build vocabulary so that students can play and work with all of us together. So earlier I mentioned that if you think of asset-based learning, the first one is to do diagnostic work. Second one is to provide different learning pathways. And the third one is to provide feedback. Now, a lab-based learning is amazing for that, because as students are experimenting, you can circulate and ask them questions. They can show you different things. And that was the first day of static electricity. And what did I do for the second day? Well, here I brought more lab-based learning. In that one, we call them electroscopes. So the little machine that we can use to show how static electricity can affect an object. And in that case, I give three options. I give the options for them to actually experiment and see with their eyes what is the learning based on what we had done the previous day. I also give reading materials, because I know that some students, all they want to do, they don't want to move around, they just want to read to learn. So some students prefer to do that. And especially sometimes students where English is not their first language, they do like to get a textbook, even though sometimes they can be old, where they can see pictures, they can see a few words that they can recognize, and they can make some notes. Often they can use flashcards, they can take a picture, and then they can have little notes, and that works nicely. And indeed, there are also people that they want to have the reading materials to do and the hands-on activity, so that they can check that whatever is happening in front of them, it is something that has been verified by other people in the textbook. So here's an example how we can use asset-based learning to help students get better. So this is, I think, quite interesting. So last week I mentioned we had the professional development day, and I was presenting about asset-based learning. And I was sharing with the other teachers how often it is very important to think about asset-based learning. But we need to understand that whatever we do in a classroom is based on asset-based teaching. All of us, we have a different learning path. As teachers, we have learned different ways when we were in school, in university, when we got our teaching certificate. When we are teaching, if we're teaching for 6 months, 3 years, 10 years, or I've been teaching for more than 25 years, our perspective on teaching is different. And that's why professional development is always important. Ideas can change, vocabulary can change, but at the end, you realize that they all look very, very similar at the end of the day. Often we have new ways of explaining things, new research happens, and often it is recycled. So what is asset-based teaching? Asset-based teaching is, for example, if you are teaching science, you are able to bring in a classroom experiences from your journey. So I was a geologist before I became a teacher, so I bring things that I learned in geology. I can bring stories about what I've done in the past. So the whole idea of asset-based teaching is the whole idea of you having stories based on your experiences. And stories are the best way to teach students. And everybody have different stories, and everybody teach different ways, and that's why it's quite important. Now we have to keep in mind that when we have learning about asset-based learning, we always have to think about sometimes our journey may be different than others. And for me, for example, I went to teachers college at the end of the 1990s. Ideas have changed, perspective have changed as well. So here you have to keep in mind the following, and I have here that teachers need to incorporate culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy. So that means that things change sometimes. Ideas. Okay, so here you're offline, check your connection again. Let's see, I'm gonna wait a second. It seems that I may have lost my connection. So let's see what we've got there. Oh, I think the connection is back on. I'm gonna have to see how it worked out earlier. So I'm gonna just backtrack a little bit just in case we missed something. So I mentioned earlier that, so for example, in math in Ontario, we have a new curriculum dating from last year. And they talk about this whole idea that when you have instructional approaches in math, but it's in all curriculum, we need that teachers need to incorporate culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy. So what I was mentioning is how sometimes when we're from different areas, different countries, we have different background, either in teaching, we've worked before in the private sector or not. The whole idea is that we have sometimes our beliefs, and we always have to address our beliefs to see are they still in line with what we want to teach. And that's the whole idea here. If you are not a teacher, but you are, for example, a team leader, here, they have a team to work with, they have team members, but as a team leader, or at this as a team member, you do have to talk to each other, but also be, okay, what's the vocabulary again? I always have to double check because English is my second language. The whole idea here is, as a human, as a teacher, you need to be culturally responsive and have relevant pedagogy or relevant perspective for your colleagues and the team members. Because if you don't, what happens is that people may not understand. No, they may, let's see, what are two words? The two words are, okay, sometimes you are sharing information, stories, and so on, and you may not have the intent to create some uneasiness, but sometimes there are impact on what we say. Oh, that's what it is. So here, there's intent and impact. This happens in a classroom. Sometimes things are changing. Sometimes things are not changing, but vocabulary change. And it's very important to be mindful of being, and there again, I'm going to, just to make sure that I have the correct wording, we need to incorporate culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy. And it is quite important to make sure everybody feels involved in the group. Because if you want to have learners to be with you as a teacher, they need to feel comfortable. If you're part of a team, members need to feel comfortable with each other. And that brings me to the third part of this podcast tonight about, I mentioned it will be asset-based leading. So this one here is about the fact that we are in many ways leaders, either in our classroom, we are leaders in our family, we can be leaders in a team, we can be a leader as part of a school, for example, or a company, or it could be even if you're volunteering at your church or for other organization. The whole idea here is that if you are leading, you need to be mindful that you are bringing to the organization the wealth of experience and knowledge with you. And that's the beauty of asset-based leading. When we have companies, for example, they're eyeing a leader from another company, and then they will go and get them to work for them. What happens is that they want in that individual to bring their knowledge, their understanding, their contacts, so that they basically are asset based hiring. And from there, leading happens. It's quite important because if you don't believe of who you are, you don't you and if you make sure that you have an identity, you feel comfortable with who you are, feel comfortable with what you know, what happens is that people do follow people that feel comfortable. And it is comforting to have a leader that is confident in their experience. So if you think earlier, so a leader needs to be culturally responsive and also have relevant management style or leadership style. It's quite important because sometimes we need to keep in mind that team members need to feel comfortable with us, and you need to be, as part of other leaders, being involved with what is the thinking to make sure that everybody, as part of a company, so there's a vision and a mission for the organization, we are all in line with what we want to do. Keeping in mind that when we talk about asset based leadership, we do enjoy the wealth of information they have. So often people talk about Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett has been having a lot of meetings over the years. And I listened to the his friend's Mongol that passed away last week. It's a sad story, but for both of them, every time they get together and they have shareholders meeting, everybody wants to know what they're going to say because everybody knows that whatever they will say has a lot of importance because we follow them for their assets. So it is an asset based following. As leaders, they are doing what they do as asset based leaders for many of us. If you follow other influencer or other amazing people in the personal development field, for example, Tony Robbins, Evan Carmichael's, these are individuals that we follow because of what they know, because of who they know, because of their perspective, their confidence, their asset in what they know, because we need that from them. So these are all things to keep in mind. So tonight's conversation has been about asset-based learning, asset-based teaching, and asset-based leading. Three important things. And we need to be mindful that the students, kids, teenagers, adults, young and older ones, all have assets to be mindful of. We have to be mindful of because when they come into a group, we want, despite all differences, we need to find a way to have a consensus that we are all together to make the world a better place. As a teacher, you want to make sure that you are confident in your stories and what you know, so that students feel comfortable to be there for you and follow you. For the same reason, if you're a leader, you want to lead with an asset-based perspective because people follow leaders for what they know and what they believe. So on this, I'm going to wish you a wonderful week. This was the topic today. Hopefully you've learned a lot. I'm going to put here in the comments below some resources about asset-based pedagogy, as well as the the curriculum of math that came up 2 years ago in Ontario. And the reason why they're new topics is that if you take science, for example, the curriculum came out in 2008, which is a long time. So new curriculum here have new ideas, they have new concepts, and often they have new language to make sure that everybody are online with what's happening. On this, have an amazing day. I've been happy to chat with you, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 7:30. Take care. Bye-bye.